When I bought my house a few years ago, I never expected that dealing with my neighbor's parking habits would turn into an actual battle. My property had a long private driveway, clearly marked with no parking signs, and it was nowhere near the street or any shared space. Yet somehow my neighbor Karen, the ultimate entitled nightmare, decided that my driveway was her personal parking space. It started innocently enough. At first, she would just pull into my driveway for a minute or two while waiting for her kid to get out of the house. I didn't think much of it. But then, one day, she left her car there for an hour while she went back inside. I had to knock on her door and ask her to move it because I had groceries to bring in. She acted like it was no big deal and even had the nerve to say, "Oh, I was just running inside for a minute. You should have just parked on the street." I let it slide. Big mistake. A few days later, I came home from work and found her car parked right in the middle of my driveway again. This time, she was nowhere to be found. Her driveway was empty, so it wasn't like she had nowhere else to park. She just chose my driveway instead of her own. I knocked on her door, and after a few minutes, she came out looking completely annoyed, like I was bothering her. "What now?" she asked, arms crossed. "Karen, your car is in my driveway again," I said, trying to keep my patience. "I need to park." She rolled her eyes. I'll move it in a bit. I'm just finishing something." I took a deep breath. "No, I need you to move it now." She sighed dramatically, like I was being unreasonable. Fine. After that, things only got worse. Karen starts doing it on purpose and then lies about it. Over the next 2 weeks, Karen started parking in my driveway more and more often. Every single time, she had some excuse. "Oh, I was just dropping something off inside. I was only going to be a second. I didn't think you'd be home so soon. You weren't even using it." One day, I came home to find two of her guest cars parked in my driveway. I was done being nice. I went straight to her door and knocked hard. She answered, looking annoyed again. "What?" I motioned toward the cars. "You need to tell your guests to move their cars. This is my driveway, Karen." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, it's just for a little while. Stop being so selfish." That was it. She thought my private property was hers. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "Okay." The first tow. Karen loses it. The next day, I made a call. I had already warned her multiple times. I had given her more than enough chances to stop using my driveway like it was some public parking lot. So when I came home and saw her car sitting there yet again, I didn't even bother knocking on her door. I just called the towing company. They arrived fast, and within minutes, her car was getting hitched to the tow truck. That's when Karen ran outside in her pajamas, screaming like a banshee. "What are you doing?" "That's my car." I crossed my arms. "Yeah, and this is my driveway." "You didn't listen, so I had it towed." She lost her mind. "You can't do that. I was just inside for a second." The tow truck driver didn't care. He was already pulling out. Karen turned on me, red-faced and shaking. "You're going to pay for this." "I'm calling the police." I shrugged. "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing I did. This is private property, and you were trespassing." She stomped back inside, furious. But I wasn't done yet. Karen calls the cops, and it backfires spectacularly. About 30 minutes later, I heard sirens outside. Karen had actually called the police, thinking they would force me to bring her car back. The officer, a young but tired-looking guy, knocked on my door. "Sir, your neighbor is claiming that you stole her car." I almost laughed. No. I had it legally towed from my driveway after she repeatedly parked on my property without permission. The officer sighed. "That's what I figured." He turned back to Karen, who was standing in her yard, arms crossed, looking smug. "Ma'am," he said, "this is private property. If he wants your car off of it, he has every legal right to have it towed." Karen's face went from smug to furious in half a second. "That's not fair. He should have warned me." The officer gave her a tired look. "Did he warn you?" Karen hesitated. "Well, yeah, but..." The officer shook his head. "Then this is your fault. If you park on his property again, you could be charged with trespassing. That shut her up. She stormed inside, slammed her door, and didn't come out for the rest of the night. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated Karen's stupidity, because the next morning, she parked in my driveway again. You would think that after the police told Karen she was in the wrong, she would have backed off and stopped parking in my driveway. But no, Karen wasn't just entitled, she was stubborn and delusional. The very next morning, as I left for work, I saw her car parked in my driveway again, sitting there like nothing had happened. At first, I thought maybe she just hadn't moved it yet from the night before. Maybe she left it there after the police told her off, and she was too embarrassed to come outside and deal with it. But then I noticed something that made my blood boil. She had moved the no parking sign I had placed on my driveway. I had it mounted on a metal pole near the entrance, clear as day. But now, she had ripped it out of the ground and tossed it into the bushes. At that moment, I knew this wasn't just her being lazy or forgetful. She was doing it on purpose. Karen thinks she's untouchable, but she's about to learn a lesson. I took a deep breath. Okay, Karen, you want to play games? Let's play. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of her car in my driveway, along with the sign she had tossed into the bushes. Then I made another call to the towing company. Hey, remember that car you towed from my driveway yesterday? Tow truck driver. Yeah, the crazy lady, right? Yeah. She did it again. Tow truck driver. Laughs no way. All right, we're on our way. I sat on my porch and waited. 15 minutes later, the tow truck pulled up, and the driver just shook his head, laughing. You weren't kidding. No. She really thought she could get away with it. Within minutes, her car was hooked up to the truck again. Just as they started lifting it, Karen came outside and lost her mind. The ultimate Karen meltdown, screaming, threats, and an attempt to stop the tow. I swear, I have never seen a person go from 0 to 100 so fast. She stormed out in her ridiculous pink robe and slippers, screaming at the top of her lungs. No, stop. You can't do this again. She ran toward the tow truck, hands flailing, like she thought she could physically stop it. The tow truck driver just sighed and shook his head. Lady, we're doing our job. You're parked on private property again. Karen turned to me, her face red with rage. You did this. You're harassing me. I crossed my arms. You parked in my driveway again, Karen. What did you expect? I was only there for a minute. I pulled out my phone and showed her the timestamp photo from an hour ago. Lying won't help you. Your car's been here all morning. She sputtered, looking like she was about to explode. Then she did something completely insane. She jumped in front of the tow truck, arms outstretched, blocking it from leaving. The driver leaned out of his window. Lady, get out of the way, or I'm calling the cops. Karen screamed, I'm calling them first. You're stealing my car again. And once again, Karen called 911. The police return, and this time they aren't amused. 20 minutes later, the same tired-looking officer from the day before showed up. The second he got out of his car and saw Karen standing in front of the tow truck, he just rubbed his temples. Ma'am, seriously? Karen started ranting immediately. This man is harassing me. He keeps having my car stolen. The officer sighed and looked at me. Same situation as yesterday. I nodded. Yep. She parked in my driveway again, and I had it towed. Oh, and she ripped out my no parking sign. Karen's face went pale. He's lying. I didn't touch any sign. I pulled out my phone. Click. I showed the officer the picture of my no parking sign in the bushes. The officer stared at it for a moment, then looked at Karen. Ma'am, you vandalized his property and trespassed again. Karen froze. I didn't think it was a big deal. The officer crossed his arms. It is. And since you were already warned yesterday, I have no choice but to escalate this. Karen gets a trespassing charge and a heavy fine. Karen thought she could keep getting away with it. But this time, the officer was done giving her warnings. He wrote a citation for criminal trespassing and handed it to her. This is an official citation. If you park on his property again, you could be arrested. Karen grabbed the paper and stared at it like she couldn't believe what was happening. This isn't fair. You're taking his side. The officer didn't even flinch. Ma'am, you were in the wrong twice. You're lucky he didn't press charges for vandalism, too. Karen turned to me, shaking with rage. I'll get you for this. You'll regret it. I just smirked. I already don't. With that, Karen stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard that a bird flew off a tree nearby. The tow truck driver laughed. Man, I hope she parks in your driveway again. This is the easiest money I've ever made. I chuckled. Something tells me she's not done yet. And I was right. Because Karen wasn't just angry, she was plotting her revenge. After getting her car towed twice and slapped with a trespassing citation, you think Karen would have finally learned her lesson. But no, Karen wasn't just your average entitled neighbor. She was on a mission not just to park wherever she pleased, but to make me pay for daring to challenge her. And that's when she decided to escalate. Karen's revenge. She blocks my driveway with a rented SUV. A few days after her meltdown, I woke up to find something unbelievable. There was a massive black SUV parked sideways across my driveway, completely blocking it. At first, I thought maybe one of my friends had stopped by and left their car there for a moment. But no. As I got closer, I noticed a piece of paper taped to my garage door. In big, bold letters, it read, "Try towing this one. Good luck." Smiley face. I just stared at it. She really thought this would stop me. Now, to be clear, this wasn't her car. She had rented this SUV, most likely under the assumption that if I had it towed, she wouldn't be the one responsible. She had gone out of her way to rent a vehicle, park it in my driveway, and then leave a note as if she had just won the war. But what she didn't realize, she had just made everything so much worse for herself. The sweetest revenge, calling the tow company again, and this time it's a bigger deal. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my phone and called my usual towing company. Hey, it's me again. You're not going to believe this. Tow truck driver, laugh, what now? She parked a rented SUV in my driveway. Tow truck driver, pauses, wait. She rented a car to block your driveway. Yep. And left a note about it. Tow truck driver, whistles. All right, we'll be there in 10. When they showed up, the driver burst out laughing the moment he saw the note taped to my garage. She really thought this was a good idea? I nodded. Apparently, the driver called his supervisor and explained the situation. The moment they heard the car was rented, they knew this was serious. Yeah, we're going to need to get the police involved, the driver said. You cool with that? I grinned. Absolutely. The police show up and Karen's plan backfires spectacularly. Not long after the tow truck arrived, so did the police. 2 officers pulled up, stepped out, and took one look at the note Karen left on my garage. One of them just shook his head. So she rented a car, parked it in your driveway, and then dared you to tow it? I nodded. Yep. The second officer sighed. All right, let's find out whose name is on this rental. One of the tow truck guys had already run the plates through their system. And surprise, surprise, Karen had used her real name on the rental agreement, which meant she was fully responsible for anything that happened to it. And that's when things went from bad to worse for her. Karen freaks out as her master plan falls apart. Just as the officers were finishing up their report, Karen finally came outside. She froze the moment she saw the cops standing by the tow truck. Then, in true Karen fashion, she tried to play the victim. Officers, this man is harassing me. The first officer just stared at her. Ma'am, you rented a car and illegally parked it on private property. Do you understand that this is a criminal offense? Karen blinked like she had just been slapped. What? The officer continued. Ma'am, this is called unauthorized use of a rental vehicle. You took possession of this car and used it for illegal activity. That means the rental company can press charges for fraudulent use. Karen stammered. But it's not illegal. It's just a prank. The officer raised an eyebrow. You left a note admitting to what you did. That's not a prank. That's intentional harassment and trespassing. That's when Karen lost it. It's his fault. He keeps having my car towed. The second officer sighed. Ma'am, that's because you keep illegally parking on his property. Karen was out of excuses. And then came the final blow. The rental company gets involved, and Karen has to pay big time. Because Karen used her real name, the officers contacted the rental company to inform them that their vehicle was involved in a legal dispute. And guess what? The rental company was furious. Because when she signed the rental agreement, she agreed not to use the car for illegal activities. And now, she was facing trespassing charges, harassment charges, a towing fee, a potential lawsuit from the rental company. The tow truck driver whistled. Lady, this is going to be an expensive mistake. Karen looked like she was about to faint. And when the officers informed her that she might lose her rental privileges permanently, she finally broke down. I didn't think it was a big deal. The officer shook his head. Well, it is. And since this is your third offense, we're placing you under arrest for harassment and repeated trespassing. Karen's mouth fell open. Then, the cuffs came out. Karen gets arrested, and I never see her again. Karen screamed and flailed as the officers cuffed her right there in the driveway. This isn't fair. He's a monster. I just waved at her. Enjoy explaining this to the judge. The police put her in the back of the car, and just like that, Karen was gone. And that was the last time I ever saw her. Final victory. No more Karen. No more parking problems. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Karen had to sell her house to pay for legal fees and fines. She moved out of state, probably looking for a fresh start where people didn't already know how much of a nightmare she was. And me? I never had another car parked in my driveway again. Even better. The entire neighborhood threw a party after she left. People were finally free from her insanity, and no one missed her. And every time I see an illegally parked car somewhere, I just smile. Because I know Karen learned her lesson the hard way.